Hey there, everyone. Welcome to this week's astrological report. This is for May 19 through May 25 of 2026. Hope you're all doing well. So this week we have a lot of major aspects playing out in the sky that I'll be going through in this video. And one of the biggest themes I see is that the nodes of fate are being activated throughout the week in different ways. And that usually will indicate that what's playing out this week has ripple effects that's shaping the long-term future. And when I talk about fate, a lot of people think fate means bad. It can go either way. Fate can be good or bad. And it can be both, too, at the same time in different ways. So I'll be talking about all that. And it looks like this week, the moon is only going to make two conjunctions, one to Jupiter in Cancer, and then the moon will make a conjunction to the South Node, which is also a part of the fate that will be playing out. So the moon will be waxing this week all through the sign of Cancer, Leo, Virgo, and the beginning of Libra by next week. As far as major aspects go, let me go ahead and list them all, and then I'll be talking about the meaning as I go through this video. So it looks like even today we start things off fateful, as the moon is connected to the nodes of fate on Tuesday here, and Mercury is T-square the nodes of fate first thing this morning. May 19. We also have Mercury making a trine to Pluto today, later on tonight. And then tomorrow we have a change of astrological season as the Sun will ingress Gemini. That's going to change the focus and what area of your chart is mostly lit up. I'll talk about that. And then it looks like by May 22nd, this Friday, the Sun will make a conjunction to Uranus in Gemini. The last time the Sun was conjunct Uranus in Gemini was 78 years ago at the end of Gemini, and it was 84 years that the Sun and Uranus first came into Gemini. So we haven't seen this in 78 years. I'll be talking about that, and we also have Mercury making a sextile to Saturn on Friday, and then Venus is connected to the nodes of fate on Friday as well. And then on Saturday, May 23, we see that Venus is in conjunct to Pluto. And then on May 24th, the Sun is making a sextile to Neptune. I also missed Venus is making a square to Neptune this week. That's going to be on Thursday. I'll talk about that. So Neptune is really activated as well in different ways. And then also on May 24, Mars is connected to the nodes of fate. Mars will be trine the South Node sextile. Mars trine the South Node and sextile the North Node. And then by next Monday, on May 25, the Sun is T-squared the nodes of fate, as the Sun will ingress Libra. And the final aspect for this report will be Mars, now in Taurus, making an exact square to Pluto. That Mars square Pluto is building up day by day, getting stronger day by day all week long, but definitely perfecting there by next week. So I would say it's still relevant, even though we have this sextile that's still going on between Venus and Mars. So that's helpful. Now, we did see some critical events when Mars was conjunct Chiron and at the last degree of Aries. So there's been a pretty big shift of energy since yesterday into today, with Mars now in Taurus and Venus now in the sign of Cancer. And then even more changes coming, as I said, as the Sun will ingress Gemini. So we're going to see some different vibes, some different situations and circumstances showing this week and beyond based on all these changes. So those are the major aspects, and welcome to new subscribers. If you are new here, check the description because I write out all the aspects for you with timestamps so you can follow along throughout the week. And you have literally every single major aspect in this report. All right. So with that, let's get started here for Tuesday on May 19. First thing in the morning, the moon is separating from Venus, where it made that conjunction late last night. So the moon now in Cancer for the next couple days. The moon is in between, Venus and Jupiter. So wherever you have the sign of Cancer in your birth chart, that's where some of the better energy is right now. It is clashing with Aries and the other cardinal signs, but overall, there's kind of a mood change, generally speaking, to be more sensitive and to be more guarded and protective, more inward. Home and family could have a bigger desire for people. Safety, security, comfort could be a stronger emotional need and desire for people with this phase. And things are going to be building up to be strong emotions, strong feelings over this next 24 hours or so as that moon is waxing towards Jupiter. But overall, it's still a pretty good placement with the moon in between these two positions. But it's more private, it's more inward compared to what's going on in more of the outer part of life. So we are coming into this new era that's all about fire and air, which is, this change for the world that is more outward. But in this particular phase, there's going to be this pull for people generally into, again, more feelings and sensitivities and what people need. This can also be a better place for nurturing self and others. It's much more caring. And it's also a placement that usually shows people have strong needs for themselves too, to, what's to be comfortable, like even comfort food or, again, nurturing self or other people. It's also a good placement for healing in general. Cancer is one of the best healers of the zodiac because it is a nurturing, caring sign generally. Now that Venus is in Cancer, there is a big shift of energy about love and romance and people's personal desires and how people show love. But anytime there's planets in the sign of Cancer, it's more changeable. It's not as consistent because it's going to be based on wherever the moon is. Now, currently the moon is here, so it reinforces all the best sides of this Cancer, this Venus in Cancer. But as the moon changes signs and, every 2.5 days, there's a mood change, generally speaking, which will change the dynamic of the sign of Cancer. It's all about the moon, ebbing and flowing and easily changeable, people's feelings and needs and circumstances. So that's where the moon is for the next couple days. And as far as major aspects for today, a lot of these have already played out super early in the morning. So really we're looking at right now, the next major aspect is Mercury T-squared the nodes of fate. So Mercury is at 4 degrees. Mercury's moving pretty quickly, though. It's going to be at 5 degrees already today. So Mercury T-squared the nodes of fate at 4 degrees of the mutable signs. So check your chart. Do you have 4 degrees of one of the mutable signs? Gemini, Virgo, Sagittarius, or Pisces? Because the nodes of fate are also at 4 degrees now. They've been at 5 degrees, and now they've just come into 4. So if you do have 4 degrees, you're wrapped up in a rare, fateful dynamic in some way. It all depends. Do you have the north node going on, or do you have the south node? If you have like 4 Virgo, then you have the south node moving over your personal planet. That's requiring changes. But Mercury's kind of in between both. So Mercury rules, Mercury is very strong here in its own sign. People's minds and thinking and communication. It's more clever, and things are a lot different now because of Uranus here, which is only going to increase as the sun comes in to Gemini and really puts more of a spotlight on that Uranus. But Mercury went through there pretty quickly. So a lot of new information, and I'll talk more about this as we go day by day, but it's a lot about life going to the next level of technology and some crazy things coming out. People's communication style, a lot more bold and direct and unpredictable. But Mercury's still in a pretty strong position, but because it's connected to the nodes of fate today, the world could be at a crossroads based on news, media, information, or our own personal thoughts, ideas about certain things. Could somehow have a long-term ripple effect, that does change the future or has this strong impact on the future. And that's going to set the tone for the rest of the day. Just know it's a fateful day based on everything mercurial. Now, this is also, about transportation, travel, technology. So anything in those categories could also have long-term fateful results. And Mercury is separating from that sextile to Neptune. That was yesterday when it was exact. So it's also tapped into this new world, dream, fantasy, illusions too, in some cases, but also trying to be inspired for this new era and new ideas and new possibilities of what we want to take action on and what we're dreaming about individually. So Mercury, that's one of the major aspects. And there is a lot pretty much, and kind of these squares they can be tougher. Squares also require action. So again, things are a little more tense as the day goes on here, because we also see that the moon is building up a square to Saturn all day long. And so as the day moves forward, the moon is going to run into that square later on at about 11 degrees. And if you have 11 degrees of one of the cardinal signs, Capricorn, Aries, Cancer, Libra, then you're under a rare Saturn transit. Last time it happened was roughly 29 years ago. So the moon is picking up on that square, especially if you have one of those in that degree in your chart, 11 degrees of cardinal. But for all of us here for a few hours this afternoon, things can be a little tougher. Again, this moon is in a position that's much more sensitive for people, pulled into their own world, safety and security, comfort, and kind of wanting to be more cautious. And yet circumstances, the mood is running into where we feel pressure in some way, where we have responsibilities, commitments, duties, or we could just run into a little bit of a heavier mood or more of a serious mood for people, more of a sensitive mood. This might not be the best moment where, if you're with others or if you're trying to, it could show some issues with how people are showing nurturing or care as well. It may not be as supportive just for a few hours as the moon is making that connection. So we have to also look at the self and take responsibility for the self and not just expect everybody else to give us what we want or what we need here in that moment. So again, it can just be a little more of a pressure or a stress that's showing, or some delay or complication, by midday here. Again, if you're new, I give you the exact time of these aspects for Arizona time, and then you can adjust it to your local time. Just do a Google search on what time is it in Arizona and what's the difference, and do the math. So you know exactly when this is playing out for you. And I would say, when the moon is making this square today, it's probably not the best time to be, running errands or doing things that you feel like you have to do. Now, some of the issue with this is a square can be a feeling that we need to be doing something. Aries, taking action. And yet, with the moon in Cancer, again, it wants to play it safe here. Cancer's more about sidestepping, not being as direct as Aries. So there's a clash in feelings and the way people are going about taking action. But if you're literally trying to do something out and about, there could be delays, there could be traffic, there could be, stoplight after stoplight. Just things are not flowing as well in that moment. And plus, with Mercury still at the apex of a T-square, there can be fateful things going on that are difficult in transportation and traveling, or other disruptions that are happening, as the day goes on here. But it's not forever, it's just temporary, and we'll move past it. And then the final aspect will be later tonight. Mercury will then be moving forward away from that T-square and make a trine to Pluto, actually midday here as well, midday into this afternoon and evening. So Mercury making that trine to Pluto, it's also connecting to power, mental transformation. It's also a very social placement for networking and communications. There could still be some issues even with technology and communications based on other things that are happening, but this is still an open alignment for also trying to go deeper, seeing what's hidden and below the surface. But it's also connecting a lot about this technology energy. In fact, even Mercury has been forming this minor grand trine with Pluto and Neptune. So really connecting to this world development too, this world point with news and media and information that's coming out, that's fateful and destined, shaping the long-term future. And then words can be more powerful today in communication. Again, that could be fateful in some way and have this long-term effect. With Mercury, Pluto, there's more of a persuasiveness with words, very powerful words, Now this is air, it's intellectual. So at the same time though, because things are more direct in air and fire, the mood is kind of at odds with all that. That may not be as comfortable with what's happening, especially during that moment that the moon will square Saturn. So it's going to, it'll only last a few hours midday, but then it'll start to separate and the mood should increase and get easier and better as, again, that moon is applying towards Jupiter. So those are the aspects for today. Let me move this forward here. And we'll get to Wednesday on May 20, and the moon is conjunct Jupiter for the first aspect of the day. But this is happening early morning. It's going to be around 6:30 a.m. on the West Coast, so 9:30 if you're on the East Coast, later in the day if you're in Europe. So that's a nice conjunction to start off the day for Wednesday. And we have a combination of different aspects, some easy, some challenging for Wednesday. But things start off pretty big mood. Moon conjunct Jupiter shows the feelings are big first thing in the morning on Wednesday. There can be some generosity. Again, this can be good for caring for self and others and nurturing and healing. And it could just show that, not everybody's chart is different. Everybody's transits are different right now. So I'm only speaking about the background, of course, as most of you know, and what's generally happening. But say you're going through difficult transits, or say you have a crisis going on in your personal area, say you have a wildfire in your neighborhood and you're having to evacuate. Well, with Moon Jupiter, everything is bigger than normal, more amplified, and then say you're under some positive transits, then this Moon Jupiter can feel more abundant, more supportive for you. And generally that's what it's trying to do. This is a pretty abundant, supportive placement overall. And just generally, people's moods and feelings are big. So people's appetite could be big, but that can be on different levels, not just literally. An appetite, a need, a feeling for something that people want first thing on Wednesday morning. And then, right after that, the moon does run into a square with Chiron. Chiron's currently at 28.5 degrees, so it is approaching critical territory, which is rare. It's about a 49 to 50 year cycle where Chiron reaches this critical point of the zodiac. So as the moon moves past Jupiter, it runs into that square, it looks like, by afternoon on Wednesday. So the first part of the day can be easier, perhaps, even though things could still be big energetically. Circumstances could still be pretty big. But then there's a few hours here. Looks like it's going to be by this evening on the West Coast, and it'll be on Wednesday night for people on the East Coast. So Moon Square Chiron definitely brings up people's sensitivities, insecurities, vulnerabilities for whatever's playing out, And I would say if you have 28 degrees, especially 28, you can give it a few degree orb if you want, but to be exact, if you have 28 degrees of Aries or 28 Cancer, then you're really wrapped up into that. But if you have 28 Capricorn, 28 Libra, Cancer, or Aries, then you're under this rare Chiron transit for the rest of this year and next year before it's all said and done. And it, again, this Chiron transit is showing you, if you do have that degree in your chart, it's showing you where there is an issue, Now it's going to be going over it multiple times, so you don't always necessarily recognize what it's talking about the first time it gets activated. It's going to, by the time it's all said and done, it's going to show you where there's a wound, where you need more healing in a certain area of your life, or where there's a sensitivity and insecurity or vulnerability that's being triggered in your own personal life. And for all of us, again, it can be a wound about family and self that is triggered, or it could just be a mood and something sensitive that's coming up. As I've said in other videos, when the moon is making a difficult aspect to a difficult position like Saturn or Mars or even Chiron, I tried to avoid nurturing in those moments, like even food. I tried to avoid eating things when the moon is exactly square a difficult planet, because it could show that maybe it's not the healthiest in that moment, or maybe there's something wrong with the food, or there could just be an issue. And it's not like every single time. It's not guaranteed to be a problem, and it might just be energetically as well. Just something to keep in mind. And then also when the moon is making difficult aspects, I say, be careful of nurturing yourself in destructive ways. So make sure what you're wanting, what you're needing in these moments are healthy, and you're aware of the dynamics of that. And then in the world, it can show some issues that could be happening as well. And then this is the day where we have a big change of season, plus all the way, most of the day, the sun is still in Taurus. The sun isn't going to change signs until Wednesday night. So most of the day, the sun is at a critical degree, the last degree of Taurus. So there is a sense of urgency for Wednesday. There is something that's possibly critical that's showing. And then that's going to lead to a change of astrological season as the sun will ingress Gemini by late on Wednesday night. So now wherever you have Gemini in your chart, now we have 3 planets there, including the sun. That's where the strongest focus is in your Gemini area of life. It's a certain area of your life that's in focus here. And generally, this is the in-between, where it's mutable now. So at this point, we have a lot of cardinal, and we have now a lot of mutable. We have a little bit of fixed, but it's mostly cardinal and mutable. So this is now about the world, life itself, the energy of daily life. It's more changeable. It's not as stable. And with all the cardinal, it's still talking about the need to start things, initiate. And mutable is about being flexible and adaptable to changing circumstances and changing your focus and the purpose that's coming in from this point forward. It's different than where the purpose has been and where the focus has been. Now we're not in as much stability as we come into this new focus here. Even Mars in Taurus, Mars doesn't like being in Taurus. It is getting this help from Venus, which can counterbalance a little bit of the issues, but it's still a position that could show things are trying to slow down on one end, be a little more stubborn and fixed and trying to create stability. And yet there's other things going on that's not allowing stability as much, which is part of the process. So it doesn't have to be a bad thing. But also the sun is approaching Uranus, like I was saying, for the first time in 78 years. Basically, it's like 1942 through 1948. And I'll talk more about that as the sun makes that perfect conjunction, but it's not quite there just yet. All right, so that's a big change for all of us. And again, it's about air. It's more intellectual now. And the vibes are trying to get a little more wild. And it's really highlighting this new era, this new reality that's coming in more and more in the future and what's going to be next for the world, but also in personal lives. Like, we're all in a new era. We're all going to have some degree of changes in our lives as time goes on here of what's building new. And a lot of those, one part of the new era is wherever you have the sign of Gemini in your chart, especially the beginning of Gemini. If you use the Placidus house system, that'll give you more detail of exactly where it's at. So strong focus now on data, information, facts, and details, and communications and information. It's also putting a lot more emphasis on changes around these technologies that are happening. You can see in the background that finger of God. I talked about that last week. It's not exact anymore, so it's starting to separate, but it's still showing in the background. Last week it was 5 degrees when it was perfect with Pluto. So it's not perfect because Neptune isn't making it's. I only work with the finger of God when it's literally perfect, where Neptune would be 5 and Pluto would be 5, and then the South Node would be 5. So it's still there in the background, but it's not. I don't think it's as powerful at this point. But I'm sure you saw it, so I'm just wanting to mention it. So anyway, coming back to this, the Sun is also going to be activating that T-square from this point forward, but it's not going to be exact till later in the week, and I'll tell you the timing of that. But it's still, as we have this shift of focus and consciousness that's starting to come in this week, by midweek, it's going to also be changing the world based on what's coming out. So it's a little more radical, it's a little more wild as the week progresses forward. So there's that big change. And then we also see the moon will change signs at the same time. On Wednesday night, the moon will ingress Leo, and this will be a change for the next 2.5 days. But luckily, this is where the moon and the sun are in harmony as they change signs. And now we're back in fire and air again. So the moon in Leo shows that there's a mood change that happens. Things get lighter but more passionate. There's going to be a stronger need for the next 2.5 days for people's self-expression, and creativity is going to come out. So people will be more bold in how they're communicating and expressing themselves. And remember, because Venus now in Cancer, that's where the beauty is. Cancer is getting the love, the beauty. Now, it all depends on the degree. So you could have 25 degrees or 28 degrees of Cancer, and Venus is very far away from you, and you may not be feeling anything yet. So it's really based on the exact degree of where Venus goes over. But generally, Venus in Cancer is showing that that's where the attractiveness is, where people are more attracted to the sign of Cancer, which generally represents feelings. It's more sensitive and nurturing, loving and caring for others. More about home and family, your own inner private world. That's where we're more attracted and what we might desire in this phase. But because Venus is being ruled by the moon, which is always changeable, as I was saying earlier, there's a shift here in how love and desires are starting to show, where now there's more of a combination where people are more wanting to show their love and express in bigger, bolder ways. And then also play a little bit. As the moon goes through Leo, waxing forward, people usually have a stronger need to have some fun and play and express themselves. But things can get more dramatic. Now, as the moon is in Leo, it's being ruled by the sun in Gemini right next to Uranus. So this isn't your normal moon in Leo. This is much more wild and bold and creative and different, of what's going to be building up here as the day goes on, as the night goes on, and then into Thursday. So very interesting with that. And then the next aspect will be the moon sextile the sun. So this is where we're in part of the lunar cycle where the lights are in harmony. Now we will have the first quarter moon. I didn't mention that in the beginning of this report, but yeah, the first quarter moon will be on May 23rd. And that's going to be a challenge to the lunar cycle. But this is where there can be an easier flow for this part of the cycle, again, because the moon and sun are cooperating. They're in harmony with each other, Leo and Gemini. So air and fire, ideas, taking action on ideas and creativity. This is great for coming up with new ideas in creative ways that you want to build or create something, or, again, express yourself in new ways. This is a great time to do it. Or even try new things that are fun and exciting. So again, this is Wednesday night when that really comes in strong. So the way people are feeling is in harmony with where the focus has turned into by this point. And then we see that the moon will also make the sextile over to Uranus, picking up on this new vibe that we're all going to be putting a big spotlight on as we get to the end of this week. So innovation and, again, creativity and new possibilities, new ideas that could be exciting. And then people's, this can also, because Venus is still in Cancer, this can be big-hearted love and big-hearted expression for people as well. Leo is known for having a big heart, and in the combination with Cancer, it can be even better. So I think there's a lot of care that's available, especially if you have early degrees of the sign of Cancer. But Venus is also building up that square to Neptune. It's already with an orb, even though it's not exact. So we also have to be a little bit careful, and I'll talk about that as it comes exact. But sensitivity in love and relationship will increase, maybe even a little confusion and illusions. And so we have to be careful. But at the same time, the moon here, as it comes into Leo, is in harmony with Neptune, aligned with the dreams, the fantasies, creativity, imagination, and that's best used to work with it in more of a creative way of what you want to create, build, or establish in some way, because this is a waxing moon, where energy is building forward from the Taurus new moon. All right, so let's see here. Where am I? Right here. So the last aspect for Wednesday night, super late on Wednesday night, will be the moon square Mars. So we have a combination here. Now, luckily, when the moon is making two aspects, one difficult and one easy at the same time, that shows that there's an outlet for the tension. But Mars and moon in a square can still show that there's a need to be doing something, taking some sort of action. There could be an impulsiveness. However, these are two fixed signs, so it can also stir up this Mars in Taurus that's not as comfortable, showing some stubbornness or some fixed energy in some way when there's a need for something to happen or something new to happen. So it can rile people up. It can rile the circumstances up to be a little more dramatic or passionate here. Late on Wednesday night or super early Thursday, Wednesday overnight hours into Thursday morning, depending on where you live. But again, because there's a sextile at the same time, there's an opening to relieve the pressure, the tension by doing something new, doing something different, with that energy at the moment. Being innovative and creative and not feeling so stuck or stubborn in some way. All right, and then, so moving forward, we get past that and we get to Thursday on May 21st. Several aspects here. The moon is waxing through Leo, and the moon makes that trine to Neptune for the first aspect of the day. So again, connecting well with dreams and fantasies and creativity, passion, performance, entertainment. Could be a strong need or desire, either personally or circumstances could just be tied into something that is more dreamy and creative. But this is also where Venus will be making that square to Neptune for the last aspect. But until then, the moon is also in conjunct to the North Node. So we have like a variety of different aspects here. Some easy, some difficult. It's a mixed bag. So the moon in conjunct to the North Node shows whatever's happening first thing on Thursday morning, super early, we're going to have to make some sort of an adjustment. And these green lines, these are the inconjunctions. And inconjunctions are aspects of irritation and adjustment. They don't work well with each other. They're not helping each other out. And that's why we have to adjust between two different areas, adjusting to what we're doing behind the scenes. This Pisces, North Node of Pisces, pulling us into our own world at times, pulling us into imagination and creativity and whatever Pisces is in your own personal chart. That's where destiny is still working on a renewal for the long-term future there. So again, this more bold, outward, creative energy, fire and passion versus what's hidden behind the scenes, what's affecting us, what's influencing us that's hidden, or the collective unconsciousness affecting the mood and the feelings or the circumstances. So again, we're just having to adjust between Pisces and Leo here, first thing on Thursday morning. And then the moon is also opposite Pluto, and this is going to be a very powerful spot of the zodiac, this opposition territory here around 5 to 6 degrees of Aquarius and Leo, because that's where there's going to be one of the most powerful full moons coming up this summer. And the moon is picking up on that. So again, it's really intense, it's passionate, it's bold, it's some pretty, it's something socially that this is connecting to in the world. Pluto being in Aquarius, the group, the community, the friends, organization, science, technology, and then things that are happening that are kind of more extreme. This can be an aspect of extremism that's being activated in some way for Thursday early morning. And then people's feelings can be more intense. There can be a power struggle that's playing out. And the fact is, again, because the moon is ruling Venus here, and Venus is now making that square. It's not perfect, but it's close enough. Again, it's going to be exact as the day goes on. So it's already building pretty tightly. So there's something that's happening, most likely, even on the world stage on Thursday, that can be intense, confusing, not seeing it all quite clear. I'll talk more about Venus on a personal level as well as we get to that aspect, but definitely something being activated here. There's kind of all these different aspects, adjustments, irritations, some confusion, some power plays and intensity going on. Something dramatic or extreme, like I was saying, could be showing here in the world. So be careful getting wrapped up in some sort of a power struggle on Thursday morning. But then the moon will make two easy aspects. The moon will trine, or sextile rather, Mercury, and then trine Saturn. So once we get past that dynamic, the moon connects well with Mercury, which is still very strong and moving very quickly in Gemini. So this is, again, connecting the mood and the circumstances to the need for communication expression, through words, through networking, through creativity, online things, publishing. Could be a good moment to publish something if you need to here on Thursday afternoon, roughly. Again, you can find the exact time in the description to use that. You always want to do it as the moon is waxing towards it, not once the moon is past it or exactly on it and separating. And then the moon trine Saturn shows that we have the ability here. Even Mercury is entering the sextile too, building up the sextile with Saturn. So the moon forms a temporary minor grand trine with Mercury and Saturn. So it's giving us a moment here that's much more practical, realistic, and responsible in our feelings and our thinking process. Or again, it could also initiate this aspect between Mercury and Saturn, which will be exact on the following day. So from this point forward, for the next 24 hours, it's showing a good connection to be making good decisions, thinking in a practical, logical, mature way, generally speaking, of course. It's also a great aspect, again, if you need to publish something or if you need to do anything material, paperwork, or deal with the government, apply for something, deal with authority figures. There's more of a flow and better opportunity for success as the moon activates that. And then the moon moves forward, and we get that last aspect on Thursday night, which is Venus square Neptune. So this is happening about 3 to 4 degrees of the cardinal signs. And if you have 3 or 4 degrees of one of the cardinals, which of course is Aries, Cancer, Libra, and Capricorn, then you're already under a once-in-a-lifetime Neptune transit. So you really should be aware of that in your own personal chart. Again, if you have Capricorn at 3 degrees, then it's a square aspect depending on what planet you have there. And mostly, look at the inner planets, your personal planets. And that can show that you need to be clear on your goals and ambitions and work and business and your responsibilities, and the structures and systems of your life could be dissolving away from the past as you need to create something new for the future, but it can also distort things too. And then if you have 3 degrees of Cancer, Venus is really activating this in some unique way. So you have to, make sure that your feelings are that you're being real with your feelings, with your needs. You need to make sure that you're looking at home and family matters in a realistic way. But it's also based on your own chart, where, what does Cancer mean for you personally? What area of life is it? I can't answer that for you, generally speaking, here with this world report. But then for all of us here, as Venus is square Neptune, well, let me continue first and I'll come back to that. And then also if you have 3 degrees of Libra, you're getting the opposition from Neptune, and you got to make sure that you're looking at your partnerships and your relationships in a realistic, down-to-earth way, that you're, also just your sense of balance, your sense of justice, and how you weigh things out in your own mind. You have to make sure that you're not distorting the reality of anything in that way. And you also have to make sure that there's nothing sketchy going on in personal relationships or whatever area of your life that Libra, is in. You can get more detail with that. But in this, for all of us, Venus square Neptune can add a lot more sensitivity, because Venus is already in a sensitive spot and it's clashing with this new development of the world. And then it's talking about also what needs to be dissolved from the past that's affecting these cardinal signs, like I was saying. So it's a little bit different from Neptune in Pisces. When Venus was squaring Neptune in Pisces, it adds a lot more of a romanticizing energy. There can still be that, but it's a little different, because this Neptune in Aries is more like trying to inspire people in more of an outward way of what you want to go after, what you want to create. It's no longer just being passive and waiting for something to fall into your lap. It's more like trying to enliven new dreams and new fantasies, new inspirations to go after and make happen on your own. And there can be a little bit of a distortion in people's personal desires or feelings or needs in that moment of how they're looking at that. Again, there's a conflict between Aries and Cancer. Aries is a sign that is about going direct, and Cancer is the sign of the crab. The crab sidesteps issues. So you have to be careful of relationship in this moment, especially, I would say, personal, family, home relationships. Make sure you're seeing things clearly. Make sure that what's going on is legit. Also look at money and resources. Make sure that if you have a strong desire to buy something, or you have just a general desire for something, make sure that it's something that's real, that you really do want. Or make sure the value of things that you're trying to get or purchase in this moment really are the value that you think they are. So there can just be a little bit of distortions here in money, resources, relationship, desires, and pleasures. There can be things that aren't as outward and visible. There can be something hidden, some deceptions even. And then, it could still romanticize things on a certain level. It can inspire, dreams and fantasies of certain types, but it's usually not the most grounded, logical and practical kind of dynamic here. But it can also be good for, creativity, music and art, and using it, especially because Venus is being ruled by the moon, which is still in Leo, super creative placement that wants to express So I would say the best use of this is to get wrapped up into some sort of a creativity of some sort, on film, photography, music, whatever it is that you're creative about or inspired about. But be careful of your love expression too. Make sure you're not distorting the way that you're expressing love and feelings so that other people aren't getting confused or anything like that. And on the world stage, be careful of bubbles. I would say in markets, be more cautious in markets here on Thursday of whatever you see happening. There could be something going on. Again, be careful with money and resources. I would kind of avoid any kind of big purchases or, it's not going to last long. This will separate pretty quickly. So just kind of be more mindful of that kind of a vibe of money, resources, and love. So also of ideas, if a love partner comes to you with some big idea, a dream, make sure it's realistic and down to earth, practical and doable, realistic, where you can actually achieve it. Or maybe they're not being as serious. Maybe they think they're being serious, or there could be a deception in somebody's approach to love or dreams. Maybe they're expressing their love in some big way. And if you see that on Thursday, I'd be extra cautious of what you hear from others. Plus, here's the sun now reaching 1 degree, approaching that Uranus. So things are going to be very different than normal. But I'm sure this is playing out on the world level too. Even with nation-state relationships, there could be something off. There could be something secret happening. So something like that. All right, and then we get to the next day on Friday, which is going to still be separating. That Venus will be separating in the first part of Friday as well. Moon is still waxing through Leo, and this is the day where we get the big conjunction of the Sun and Uranus, again, for the first time in 78 years. So, I have researched this in the past. I always have a hard time remembering every single detail because I research so many different things. But basically, this is going to be next level. Every time we have a really rare conjunction like this, first of all, it is a brand new cycle. 1 second here. It is a brand new cycle between Sun and Uranus for the next year. So this is a seeding moment for what's going to be playing out over the next year, this next couple days, Friday, Saturday, into Sunday. So we'll still see some results of this in a new way, but we're not going to see all the results of what this is talking about instantly necessarily. And what this usually means is next level of technology. So last time, like in the end of the 40s, last time they were conjunct, it was like the chip for computing. It was like the beginning, the seeds were being planted for the future computers, that we all are dealing with now. And again, it's not instant. It's like this is going to be for years into the future. So last time it was about the computer, and then another time with Sun, Uranus, and the last time the helicopter made its first long-term flight, and that's where the helicopter, new flight, new technology, and transportation and traveling was coming in, for the future, helicopters. So now that it's come back around, it's going to be to the next level of life, next level technology, next level transportation and traveling. So eventually you're going to see more and more flying cars, literally flying cars. I mean, they're already being tested. They're already out there, but it's more like in the very beginning stages still. It's going to be really coming out more and more over this next 7 years. But even after that, even this next 7 years, it's still like the whole 7 years is like a seeding moment for the long-term future for this next 84 years, So again, we're not going to see everything instantly. And then this is also a place that's very clever, with inventions. A lot of new inventions will be coming out more and more to the next level of life in different categories. So technology and communications and education is going to be beginning to change this next 7 years. Both higher education and lower education will be changing compared to where it's been in the past here. But in this moment here on Friday, it can still be a little bit of a wild card vibe. There's a sense of freedom and things that are very different, people's communication. There's a focus on something that's very unusual that we're not normally seeing or dealing with. So there's unpredictability. There could be some volatility. With the moon still in Leo, it's still very passionate and bold and dramatic of what's playing out possibly here on Friday. And yeah, even again with transportation and traveling, probably something's coming out in new ways. And then, of course, the data, information, media, news is really focused on something unusual, which probably going to be more of those files coming out about, all these different things about the weird stuff of life. And again, personally, I think there's something fishy about all that based on astrology, but you can believe whatever you want. And it's kind of bold and unusual focus of what's showing in the world. So there's all kinds of different ways you could be looking at this, and we'll be talking about this for the next 7 years. So there's a lot more to be said about it, but I have to kind of move along in this report to cover all these aspects. And it's also a fateful day too, including with Venus, but we also see that Mercury is making a sextile to Saturn. So at the same time, again, there is this ability to be mature, to be dealing with authorities in a positive way, anything mercurial. So again, if you need to do paperwork, deal with the government, deal with authority figures, communicate something to somebody of power, this could be a good time to do it. Now, there's still a little bit of an unpredictability about the day because of the Sun-Uranus, or what's being communicated to authorities, or what you're focused on here could be something unusual, something that's just doesn't happen all the time. But it's still a good aspect for making decisions, being open-minded, looking at things differently with new possibilities, new ideas, new thoughts, but also perhaps some crazy information that could be coming out on this day or so. And then at the same time, Venus is trine the north node of destiny and sextile that south node. So again, there's a fateful dynamic playing out on Friday, especially in regards to money, resources, relationships, which again, on the global level can be between nation states, and some big development that could have a long-term effect on the future. But then on personal levels, your own personal relationships, or anything about the financial life, and then something changing probably on the financial level of life on the global level, like banks or markets, or some new information or some big change going on. If I remember right, it might have something to do with the Fed changing this week, maybe by Friday or something. That could be it. That's affecting the future. But it should be a positive change because Venus is more in harmony now with the nodes of fate. And the sun is still building up to the T-square with the nodes of fate. So again, a fateful day. And then the moon is also making that trine to Chiron, which helps people feel a little bit better about themselves, increases the confidence and the ability to express, and just helps where this wound is taking place at 28 degrees of Aries. And then the last aspect of the day is the moon changing signs. The moon will be leaving Leo, and this is going to be by late Friday night. So for most of the day, the moon is in Leo, and then it reaches this critical degree at 29, the most bold and passionate sense of urgency for something, and plus all this excitement, this very unusual focus that's been going on all day on Friday. And then that ends up changing the overall mood by late Friday. So for some people, it'll be early morning Saturday that the moon changes signs. But for people on the West Coast, the moon comes in for the last aspect really late on Friday into Virgo. So let's move right to Saturday on May 23. We start the day off with this new phase of the moon in Virgo for the next 2.5 days. And the moon is right next to the south node. So for the first aspect, the moon is square Uranus, and then this is the first quarter moon, right as the moon comes in here to Virgo. So as this mood changes, it's a part of the cycle that's more challenging by this weekend on Saturday. Now, this is happening really early. Some of the most difficult aspects are really early in the morning here. So you might be most affected if you're in Europe because it's first thing, when people are waking up. And then there could still be issues everywhere, on Saturday early morning when people are sleeping, or if you're out on Friday night super late into Saturday morning, then you're most likely to get wrapped up into something here. I would maybe not be out and about in a busy environment on late Friday into the early morning hours of Saturday. You might want to call your night over like before midnight or something, because then you might get wrapped up in some sort of a problem or issue here. And this first quarter moon is wrapped up with Uranus, so it's not your normal first quarter. It's already a tension between the moon and the sun, what people are feeling and needing in the circumstances versus what they're focused on, which has been this Uranus, this change, this something very different, this need for freedom and revolution and liberation in certain ways, about old thoughts, old ideas. That's a part of it as well. But as the moon comes into Virgo, now it's being ruled by Mercury. And Mercury is strong, and Mercury's over here with all this Gemini stuff. But with the moon in Virgo now, it's picking up on where this south node is and what this south node has been talking about. Again, Virgo hasn't been the sign that's been getting a lot of support. Now, luckily, Venus in Cancer temporarily is helping out Virgo, and now Mars in Taurus is helping out Virgo a little more. But generally, with the south node here, Virgo's not a sign where it's getting extra love or attention. It's more about what do we need to change in our Virgo area of life. And if you have personal planets there in the beginning of Virgo, you're definitely being asked to change something. Virgo's all about having everything just right and having the details and the facts. And maybe that's part of the problem based on what came out here with the Sun-Uranus and all this new information that's pretty wild and crazy. Now Virgo wants to sort it all out, get to the details, make sure it's real and legit, but it can also be all kinds of other things. Like, this is not a time where we have to be working with perfection. We don't have to have everything just right in perfect order and in our own personal lives and what we're trying to do personally. Again, the North Node is saying open up to new possibilities, open up your imagination in new ways and how you're living life and working with things, including how you live with your health life. There's things about health that need to change that have been ongoing since last year with these eclipses in Virgo and South Node for the 1.5 years moving through here. It's like health routines, health patterns, need to change, generally speaking. It all depends on your chart too. Where do you have Virgo in your personal chart? That's where there needs to be changes and things that are purging and purifying and reorganizing. But at the same time, this can be critical. It's more critical when there's difficult aspects to Virgo, because Virgo sees what's wrong. Virgo typically sees where things need to be improved, where there's disorder, and then trying to fix that when everything else isn't cooperating with it can be frustrating and challenging, and then people can express themselves in more critical ways. And then generally it's about trying to be helpful, though. Every time the moon comes into Virgo, the mood generally shifts to try to be helpful for people, but sometimes it can come across as critical and cynical too. So, try not to get wrapped up into stuff like that. And then plus with the moon approaching the south node, it's not a phase of the moon where we generally feel supported. Something's missing. We need something that we don't have here. And then there's a challenge as the moon squares the sun, the first quarter moon. But also as the moon squares Uranus on Saturday morning, it can activate craziness and unpredictability. I mean, if you thought Gemini was already crazy, you haven't seen nothing yet. Gemini goes to the next level of crazy. And I'm only half joking about that. But seriously, it's going to be a crazy, wild time of what's happening in the world and how people are thinking and what comes out in the news and the media and just life itself. Again, this is changeable, mutable energy. It's all over the place. And usually when you have a square like this with two mutable signs, it's about fumbling. You're trying to work something out. Now, luckily with the mutable signs, even though people can fumble in the beginning, we can find solutions. We can work it out. Trial and error, and again, needing to be flexible and adaptable and not too fixed or stubborn, and just be willing to change and allow life to be changeable too. So if you're trying to have a tight schedule, like, anything with Virgo, if you're trying to make everything just right and perfect, you're not going to do well. So you have to be more open and kind of let things be, let things go, let things play out without trying to be overly controlling about it all, because it's a wild, crazy little time here. And so some volatility and unpredictability is most likely coming in, and then the moon squares the sun. So the first quarter is about the crisis in action. It comes back to the root, which was the Taurus new moon. And at this point, we're being forced to look at our intentions. What have we been trying to deal with for the last week? Now there's a challenge in how to move it forward. There's an obstacle of some type, generally speaking. And I would say if you have 1 to 3 degrees, well, let's say 1 to 4 degrees of the mutables, then you're wrapped up in fate and destiny and this once in a lifetime Uranus transit that's trying to change and liberate you from something in your life. And it could feel uncomfortable or stressful in this moment on Saturday morning. So things aren't as smooth or as flowing in this moment. And again, something could feel like we're missing something or we don't have everything we want, and that could be a part of the problem. And then it's fateful too. This is another activation of fate and destiny and karma, and even dealing with things of the past too could be coming up here. Some of the issue could be about health for some people. Other people could be about work situations. Well, it is Saturday, so it all depends on your personal situation. But work, service, health, and then it could also complicate travel, transportation, anything about education. It could complicate, again, data, facts, and news and information, or even conversations and just how people are thinking about things and trying to sort out the details. Now, luckily, both of these signs are ruled by Mercury, which is strong and still in that separating aspect from Saturn. So I think we can work with it, but again, it's going to be messy and kind of all over the place here, potentially. Now, with that, as the moon crosses over that south node and that fateful point on Saturday, May 23, the moon does trine Mars. So again, it gives us a little bit of an outlet for action and being able to, take an appropriate action. But then the moon is in conjunct to Neptune, which adds a little bit of distortion, confusion, and reactivates that finger of God aspect. Still not perfect, but it's pretty tight because now Neptune is approaching 4 degrees and the moon is at 4. Pluto's backing up to 4, but it's not perfect, but it could show, again, a fateful dynamic that's playing out here, but having to make adjustments in different ways. There could be some irritations going on. There's also another finger of God. This one is perfect as the moon reaches 5 degrees of Virgo, reactivating last week's energy too, but now connecting to Venus with the sextile, and then both Venus and the moon are making the in conjunction to Pluto, showing that Pluto's at the apex of this finger of God, which is only temporary because it's just the moon. So something here on Saturday, late morning, afternoon, you can find the exact time in the description, but Venus will be making that in conjunction all day, actually. So we're having to make a lot of adjustments here in some way. Luckily, though, the moon and Venus are connecting, so there's something nice, too, that we can work with here in work, service, practical things that are changing that we're needing to deal with the home, the family, money, and resources. But relationships are also still kind of in a funky point here because of the in conjunction. So again, Venus is in a totally different area than where Pluto is, the Aquarius, the friends and the community. The desire really isn't on board with that in this particular phase. I mean, that's just generally speaking, but Venus in Cancer is more homebound, more inward, it's more sensitive and caring and loving, and it's clashing with the power dynamic within the community and the friendships. So, or it could be talking about, having a personal desire for wherever you have Cancer, your inward world, and then maybe something comes up with a friend or something in your community that you have to adjust to. That's possible, especially if you have 5 degrees, in one of these spots. But the circumstances still connecting to Venus can smooth it out a little bit too for what's going on here on Saturday. So really the problem is the community, the friends, or the social life versus the more personal stuff that we're doing here on Saturday. So we might have to make adjustments to what's going on in the outer world, versus what our personal everyday life is showing on Saturday afternoon or Saturday late morning. So again, another fateful day. And then, that's the easiest aspect for the last aspect, because then the moon is in conjunct to Saturn. So a lot of adjustments and irritations, it looks like, for Saturday. This is definitely a little more critical. People can be more cynical, a mood issue for Saturday night. So there's a moment there on Saturday that there could be a good connection, if you're dealing with other people or something socially, but I still feel like it's not going to be at its best Saturday for your social life. Now, there could be exceptions based on your own personal chart, but generally speaking, in the background, vibes are off for Saturday for social, friendship, life, and community stuff. All right, so moving forward, let me check my video here. Oh shoot, I'm running behind. It's going to be a longer video. Okay, so we get to Sunday on May 24, and first aspect is the moon squaring Mercury. So there's a clash here between people's feelings and the way people are thinking and the communication. And again, there could be some traveling issues, technology issues, glitches here and there, kind of carrying over from Saturday. Issues from Saturday could carry over for first thing in the morning on Sunday. But it's only temporary. That moon square Mercury, not the best time to publish or communicate or do material things in that moment. But it's super early, so most of the day on Sunday, we won't have that issue. And then things kind of smooth out as the day goes forward on Sunday, because then the moon makes a sextile to Jupiter, and that can be feeling a little bit better. Things get easier, more flowing, although the Mars square is building up pretty tight too in the background, which again is building up day by day of this week. There can still be some intensity in the background, but especially even by next week. But at least the moon connects to Jupiter, so people could feel more optimistic, just feeling better about things, still trying to sort things out, make things better, deal with your Virgo area of life. And then Sun is making a sextile to Neptune from this new era, this new world development. We're really focused on the dreams, what's inspiring us, what's changing, and what we want to go after and create in the world. Or what we want to create for our own personal lives, as we're picking up on that for Sunday, very strong. It's also great for anything creative as well, especially more of an outward way, more initiating your dreams and inspirations to make something happen. And then it's another fateful day, that Mars is also connected to the nodes of fate. So whatever's happening It's, again, shaping the long-term future. So just know that if you're initiating something, or if you're dealing with something that's rare on Sunday, just know that it definitely could be a part of the future and affect your long-term future. And it could be positive. Again, fate doesn't mean necessarily negative. It can be positive or negative. And usually a sextile and a trine show it can have more of a positive result. It's easier for whatever's happening that could have a long-term effect on the future. And then we get to Monday on May 25, and the moon is at the end of Virgo, and we'll be changing signs as the day goes on here. So there's a lot of aspects for Monday. The first one is the moon in conjunct to Chiron, having to make adjustments to that issue of 28 degrees, and now Chiron is approaching the last degree of Aries. But again, it's going to be going over that degree multiple times until next year. So it's only the beginning. 29 degrees will now start to get the activation of Chiron in a rare way. So if you have 29 Aries, 29 Capricorn, 29 Libra, 29 Cancer, you're under a rare Chiron transit, and circumstances in the mood is having to adjust to that in some way as we get to early Monday morning. So more irritation, more adjustment perhaps. And then the moon changes signs. Moon ingresses Libra for a new phase for the next 2.5 days. Now, as the moon is in Libra, it's being ruled by Venus, and Venus is being ruled by the moon. So this is a temporary mutual reception between the moon and Venus, which makes both of these stronger than they otherwise would be. So now Venus is much stronger by Monday. Love, relationship, money, resources, and better opportunity for how people are feeling, because the moon is strong too, getting the help from Venus. So people's mood and feelings and circumstances, now they are going to clash. They are going to come into a square eventually, but it's still a mutual reception for the next 2.5 days. So now with the moon in Libra, there's a general need to be looking at things in a more objective way, which kind of does clash with Cancer, which isn't as objective. Cancer is subjective. But now this is an intellectual air sign. It's more about communicating, more outward again, more about being fair and trying to, again, use the scales and look at things in a more just way, trying to find more equality and justice and harmony, which the mutual reception should help us out, even if it adds tension in the process between these two signs. Plus the moon is, opposing the Aries, so it's going to really activate these cardinal signs. What needs to start? The moon is waxing, and it's now in harmony with the Gemini. So things also have to start, initiate, move forward. But it's also a phase where people generally want to find more harmony and balance within their relationships, especially on a more outward, social, less attached way. Issues with home and family relationships could increase a little bit more for the next 2.5 days, a little more tension. But because there's that mutual reception, we'll be able to work with it and work with it without causing too much of an issue generally there. So again, the moon here is about the scales and weighing things out in a more objective, detached way, more intellectual way, and dealing with one-on-one connections with people, a stronger need for that, and stronger need for diplomacy, making deals, trying to find that harmony and that peace with others. And of course, on the nation level, that will also be a part of the process that's trying to happen. However, the issue is the Mars squaring Pluto coming exact. It'll be the last aspect for Monday night, but it's strong all day, really tight on Monday. Now, again, this aspect can play out at any point this week, especially this weekend into next week is most likely when it can occur. Some major issue, that's going to be in the background here. Mars, though, it's being ruled by this Venus, and they're still in a sextile. So Mars is still getting some help here. Plus this moon in Libra is going to try to help the situation out. So there's still likely to be some conflict and even a crisis moment here on some level. But again, I think it could be so much worse in other dynamics. So this is also a fateful day. Well, first, the moon makes that trine down to Uranus. So again, there's also this opening to look at these radical revolutionary changes in regards to relationships and how to find a better balance. Regardless of the topic, we have an opportunity to be innovative and creative and make those changes to bring better balance by doing things that are different, unusual in some way. Plus, the moon will be forming a grand trine with Gemini, Aquarius, and Libra. So things are going to open up and flow in this more intellectual, communicative way, technology and innovation and just changes that are going to be flowing. And yet there's a stubbornness. There's something critical in the background. And yet the sun is also T-squared the nodes of fate. So whatever is happening, it's putting the world at a crossroads on Monday and will have long-term effects on the world based on what's playing out. So there's tension, there's adjustments, and there's flowing dynamics all at the same time. The moon opposite Neptune, though, is also culminating certain things about dreams, inspirations, fantasies, and again, activating that 3 degrees that I talked about earlier. Now it's going to come into 4 degrees, so 3 to 4 degrees of the cardinals. So again, having to look at your relationships and understanding, trying to get more clarity about self and other in this new dynamic for this new era. And it can be dissolving away old relationships too, or trying to change the dynamics of old relationships. Things need to change on multiple levels. But it can still be a little bit sensitive and confusing. There can be some uncertainty in that moment, which is still, this is about afternoon, evening hours, depending on where you live. But then the moon makes the trine to the sun and Pluto. And the sun next Tuesday will be making that trine to Pluto. So the power dynamic is in really strong play here. So again, now this is much more social and about the community, even though Venus is still not on board with that necessarily. And there's more inconjunctions, more adjustments, more irritations, mixed up with all this. But a grand trine, and Neptune can be the kite part of it. So again, it's really activating kind of this new era in regards to our relationships and partnerships and what's trying to change on that level. So some new developments on the world level, probably about nation states and leaders and what's in development here. So a power transformation in the air, power play, transformation, but it's more intellectual, more objective, more detached and communicative. And that's about the gist. And then that last aspect for Monday night is when Mars, Pluto is exact. So if you have 5 degrees of the fixed signs, you're under a once-in-a-lifetime Pluto transit. That's not just a one-day thing. I've talked about that the last couple of weeks. This is an ongoing. This is only the very beginning if you have 5 degrees. You're not seeing all the results until the end of 2027 when Pluto moves on from this. But there's going to be another activation. If you have 5 degrees of Aquarius, Taurus, Leo, or Scorpio. Now, again, if you have Pluto, there's a lot of you that have Pluto at 5 degrees of Scorpio. The outer planets are just generational. So everybody of your generation is going through a new era, a transformation, but it's more personal if you have a personal planet like the sun, the angle, your moon, Venus, Mercury, Mars at 5 degrees of one of these, or Saturn or Jupiter. But if you have the outer planets just by themselves, it's not as personal for you. It's just life itself is in a transformative moment. But again, if you have a personal planet there, then you're really being activated. And this can be intense. This can be, this is a first quarter between Mars and Pluto. So it's like something is trying to force its way, being overly pushy. It's like the bull getting riled up. With Mars in Taurus, that's typically a position. Taurus doesn't get reactive as quickly. You have to really push, and poke the bull several times before it gets pissed off. and it's already been activated multiple times, and this could be a moment where, there's a raging bull kind of a moment. Something too forceful, something stubborn too at the same time, something fixed that doesn't want to change, that needs to be moving forward. And then it can be an issue with the power dynamic too. Too much power, too much force. There can be an issue with science and technology, or with the community, a friend, something within that Aquarius realm of life, and especially if you have 5 degrees. So kind of check yourself and how forceful you are if you're pushing for your personal agenda. Now, luckily, I think the moon here is going to help people try to find more harmony, more compromise, and try to work with it. I think there is an opportunity to work with this where it doesn't have to get too extreme. But for some people, they can be overly reactive and get wrapped up in some sort of a dramatic situation. And then there could be something happening on the world level, maybe an earth event or a crisis of some type. This can be volcanoes. We've already been seeing the earth really responding to all the big energy already. But there could be something more, earthquake, volcano, or military. Mars does rule the military here, and there could be some sort of a military event by next week. Or other issues like accidents or something that could be an issue. But again, I think it's so helpful that the moon is in this position to help counterbalance some of that. All right, so that's what I have for you. I hope that's helpful. I hope you got something out of that. Thanks for watching. Hit that thumbs up if you liked my video, and I'll catch you on the next one. Have a great week.